The old peach red glass door, with only the words, massage, left on the yellowed sticker. Since I inherited this store, there hasn't been a single person inside. Produced through water, it must be a high-quality product. 3 high-quality books are completed, accumulating millions of words. Please rest assured to invest and have more monthly tickets. Keywords of the novel. My employee is not human, with no pop-ups, my employee is not human, with full TXT download, and my employee is not human, with the latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Massage Shop. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Massage Shop. On the street, Zhang Yi looked at the peach red glass door in front of him, with the words, massage, pasted on the facade with red stickers. However, the quality of the stickers was obviously not good, and they had already begun to fade. After confirming that the address was correct, Zhang Yi walked forward and pushed open the glass door. Ding-ling. A bell hangs on the glass door. In the room, a curtain divides the room into inner and outer rooms, and the mirror hanging on the wall is facing 2 massage chairs. Do you need a massage? Standing next to the massage chair, the old man wearing dark sunglasses lifted his head. Hello, my name is Zhang Yi, and Zhang Shulai is my father. I received a notice of his death and came to tidy up his belongings. Are you Zhang Yi? The old man lifted his sunglasses and carefully examined Zhang Yi's face with his left eye. You are very similar to your father. Oh. My surname is Zheng, and your father and I are close brothers. Please call me Uncle Zheng. Hello, Uncle Zheng. Sit down and wait a moment. Okay. Uncle Zheng put on his glasses again and walked to the incense burner on the nearby table. After sprinkling some powder in the incense burner, he lit it and covered it again. Green smoke rises from the incense burner. Hiss. Ah. The man lying on the massage chair took a deep breath into the air, closed his eyes, and began to relax. The man's voice caught Zhang Yi's attention and he lowered his head to look at the guest. The other person appears to be in their early 70s, and their bright head can reflect light even under the light. Pa, 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 pa. Uncle Zheng gently patted the old man's cheek with his hand, using a delicate technique. He raised it high and fell it gently, making a sound like a horse's hoof. Then, from the nearby box, he took out a bottle of medicinal wine and applied it to the palm of his hand. After repeatedly rubbing it, he placed it on the old man's neck and kneaded it for a while before making a gesture similar to locking his throat. Lower your head. Hey. Hey. Uncle Zheng mentioned it several times in a row, but found himself unable to do so. He could only turn his head to look at Zhang Yi and say, Can you help me? Help. Zhang Yi looked at the old man and gently frowned. Yes, just give him a hand. Zhang Yi nodded and supported the old man's arm. The old man's arm was very hard, and it felt like he was pinching it against a stone. Zhang Yi lifted it hard, but the old man remained motionless. Use force. Okay. The old man cooperated with the two of them to try to straighten his waist as much as possible. Relax. Uncle Zheng placed his other hand on the old man's chin and twisted it forcefully. With a click. The 3 of them breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. The old man twisted his neck, opened his eyes, and looked at the face in the mirror in front of him. He touched his face with his palm a few times and nodded in satisfaction. I have suffered from head to toe throughout my life, but it's your skill that makes me feel like I still deserve my face. Sit a little longer. Facing the old man's praise, Uncle Zheng just patted his shoulder and turned to Zhang Yi. Wait a moment, there aren't many things, I'll tidy them up. Zhang Yi nodded. Young man, thank you. If it weren't for you just now, I wouldn't have been able to get up. It's okay. Zhang Yi said as his gaze swept over the old man. It was only then that he noticed that the old man was wearing a purple long shirt and a jacket. Buzzing. At this moment, Zhang Yi's phone suddenly vibrated and he took it out of his pocket. It was a short message. Upon seeing the message above, Zhang Yi looked a bit embarrassed. He had already received this message the day before yesterday. What, something's up? No, my friend's father had an accident and a memorial service will be held at 11 o'clock this morning. Oh, we can make it. The funeral home is very close here. Turn left when you go out, take the road to the bus station, and walk a few more steps forward to get there. Zhang Yi put away his phone and said, I haven't been in touch for a few years. That's not even a good friend. The old man leaned half of his arm against the armrest, and his index and middle fingers spread out to hang and gesture. My old friends, even if they go out of town, keep in touch every month. The next year, they gather together, listen to music, drink tea. People who haven't been in touch for years, let alone their father's death, it's none of your business. The old man reached into his clothes and groped for a while before taking out a bag of huazi. After fumbling for a while, I couldn't find the lighter. Hey, my little bunny is always giving me cigarettes and hasn't given me a lighter. Do you have a fire, little brother? Zhang Yi took out a lighter from his pocket and handed it over. The old man took the lighter and said, in my lifetime, I only have 2 hobbies. Listening to music, smoking, drinking tea, and singing opera. He lifted his clothes and took out a pink Walkman from his waist, pressing the play button. A Su Chu small song accompanied by a pipa and eru. Listening to the melody, the old man put the cigarette to his mouth, lit the lighter, and the cigarette burned like paper. But the old man didn't care either, took out a cigarette and handed it over. 1. Zhang Yi stared at the smoke still emitting flames on the old man's fingers and shook his head, I don't smoke. Are you still carrying a fire without smoking? For social purposes. The old man nodded, took the cigarette back, and took a deep puff from the cigarette in his hand. Hiss. Poop. Shu Tan, everything in a person's life is meaningless. When they die, having a few relatives and friends at a funeral is the real thing. The old man stood up, smoking, listening to music, swaying and walking towards the door. He couldn't help but hum along with the tune. Listen to music, smoke, this is life. The door of the dingling room is closed. After Zhang Yi watched the old man leave, Uncle Zeng walked out from behind the curtain, holding a box in his hand and placing it on the table. There is a death certificate on the box. Here, these are all your dad's things. Speaking, he pointed to this shop. Including this store. Store. Zhang Yi was a bit surprised, thinking that Uncle Zeng was the owner of the store. Zhang Yi looked at the box in front of him and reached out to pick up the death certificate. The black and white background photo showed a portrait of a stranger. I don't want this thing, you can handle it as you see. He put away the death certificate, and as for the box, Zhang Yi pushed it back one by one. Don't. Uncle Zeng looked up at him. I find it dirty. When I just remembered the year, this guy directly took the mistress to sleep at home. After being hit by his mother, he not only injured her and hospitalized her, but also abandoned their mother and son. He had been carefree with the mistress for so many years and never returned. I don't have any other intention of coming, I just want to see this guy die with my own eyes. You can do whatever you want with his things and don't disturb me in the future. Wait a moment. As Zhang Yi was about to leave, Uncle Zeng stopped him and took out a piece of paper and a pen from his pocket. These things, whether you want them or not, always leave a voucher and sign on it, so as not to make things difficult for me, an old blind man, in the future. Zhang Yi took the paper, and all the handwriting on it was written with a brush, neat and atmospheric. The general idea is that one has already received the relic and cannot continue to entangle in this matter in the future. Not to mention in the future, if there were no accidents, would never return to L City in my lifetime. Who can say for sure about the uncertain matter? If you don't sign, I'm not at ease. Okay. Zhang Yi nodded, picked up the pen on the table, wrote his name on it, put down the pen, and turned around to leave. Ding-ling. Upon hearing the sound of the door closing, Uncle Zheng picked up the paper with Zhang Yi's name on it, stood up, and pulled open the curtain behind him. Behind the curtain, there is an altar with a spiritual niche placed. Take out a long incense from the altar, light it and insert it into the incense burner, and look at the photo of the man enshrined in the spiritual niche. You're so ugly, your son is quite handsome. Hee, I'm afraid your wife borrowed seeds from you behind your back. Just kidding, it's okay if it's your son. If you die and your son comes up, I don't believe it. I can't find that thing. Speaking, he took out a black book from the box containing relics and placed it on the altar. With a shake of his hand, the paper seal with Zhang Yi's name on it floated up, and the ink on it dissolved and twisted, entwined around the signature left by Zhang Yi, forming a strange curse pattern. The curse lines flow down like ink, pouring them onto the black book on the street. Zhang Yi's footsteps were light and agile. From time to time, pedestrians wearing Tang and Hanfu could be seen taking photos. Ancient clothing shops were everywhere on the street, and with the antique architecture of El City as the background, it didn't seem out of place. Zhang Yi. A car passed by Zhang Yi and came to a stop. After the car window was lowered, a man wearing a mourning cloth leaned out and waved at him. How did you encounter it here? Click. Wang Bin got off the car and walked over excitedly. I thought I saw the wrong person earlier, but I didn't expect it to be you. I didn't expect you to come over. Thank you, thank you. Upon hearing this, Zhang Yi knew that the other party had misunderstood, but he didn't explain. He just followed Wang Bin's words and said, I was about to rush over when I met you. I'm sorry. Wang Bin. A woman poked her head out of the car window. In Zhang Yi's impression, he had seen a woman once and knew it was Wang Bin's mother. He took the initiative to say, Auntie, it's a day of mourning. Wang Bin's mother nodded awkwardly and said, let's get in a car and go together. Okay. Take a car with Wang Bin to the funeral home. Zhang Yi, thank you. Wang Bin actually had a lot of words to say to Zhang Yi, but he didn't know how to speak up. Let's talk about it when we go over today. Zhang Yi patted his shoulder. He was diagnosed with lung cancer by smoking, so why don't you burn him a cigarette? The two walked to the paper-burning furnace, and Wang Bin's mother snatched the cigarette from her youngest son's hand and tore it up in a few bites before throwing it into the trash can. Wang Bin quickly helped his mother leave upon seeing the situation. After seeing his mother leave, the youngest son quietly pulled out a plastic bag from a nearby tree, which was filled with cigarettes made of paper, one by one from Greater China. Zhang Yi walked past him and watched as one cigarette after another was thrown into the fire. Suddenly, he remembered the old man's smoking and lack of fire today. Don't just burn cigarettes, remember to burn 2 lighters. The younger son paused for a moment and nodded thoughtfully. Many guests came to attend the funeral, but not everyone had a sad expression on their faces. Zhang Yi was sandwiched in the crowd, and from time to time, he could hear discussions about his family background. Several elderly people were also in the crowd, looking sad. Last time we agreed to go to Suzhou and listen to the authentic night rain in Xiaoxiang. As soon as Lao Wang leaves, we old guys want to get together again and sing opera, but the chances are very limited. Humph, he walked faster than me, leaving only us old friends. Whoever lives to the end, no one will send him away. Fuck you, crow mouth. At this moment, a mournful sound echoed from the speaker, overwhelming the idle chatter in my ear. Dong dong. At this moment, the MC walked onto the stage and patted the microphone on his hand. While checking the microphone, he was also reminding everyone that the farewell ceremony had begun. The solemn and mournful music, along with the MC's eulogy, caused occasional cries from the crowd. Silence and courtesy. Zhang Yi walked in line with the crowd towards the funeral hall, completing the final journey of bidding farewell to his body. The Swona sound that used to sound harsh today has a different flavor. As soon as I entered the gate of the morning hall, I heard the unhappy roast voice of the aunt behind me. I'm dying. Why is there such a strong smell of smoke? Who smokes here? Zhang Yi raised his nose. There was indeed a smell of tobacco, but it was not as exaggerated as the other party said. As the team moved forward, Zhang Yi looked up and saw a photo hanging in the hall. In the black and white photo frame, an old man smiled kindly. Zhang Yi's face suddenly turned ugly, and he stiffly turned his neck to look at the crystal coffin. Familiarity with the long shirt made him hesitant to look up, his eyes fixed on the hands lying flat on his chest. Holding the pink Walkman in his left hand, his index and middle fingers slightly curled in a smoking position. The Swana tone in the funeral music was getting higher and higher, but Zhang Yi's mind was filled with the voice of the old man. Listen to music and smoke, listen to my own sorrow and music, I also want to smoke a cigarette. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. At noon, it was still sunny and sunny, but in the afternoon it started to turn cloudy. Arriving at the door of the massage parlor again, Zhang Yi placed his hand on the glass door handle and saw the massage chair through the pink glass door. His face turned pale, his whole body was stiff, his legs were soft and fluffy, and a strong sense of nausea surged through his stomach. Hey, can you enter? If you don't, just give way. A man in Hanfu stood behind him and looked contemptuously at Zhang Yi, saying, this is a legitimate massage parlor. Walking inside, there are several hair salons. Hey, what are you running for? Hoo, the intense gasping sound made Zhang Yi feel like his lungs were about to burst out. He stopped, turned around to look behind him, took out his phone, and searched for the train ticket to leave L City. The latest train is at 10 p.m., and the bus will be available at 7 p.m. tonight. So after ordering a bus ticket on my phone, I immediately headed towards the passenger station. Arriving at the ticket window, Zhang Yi took out his phone to pick up the ticket. Train number 35 departs at 7:45 a.m. After receiving the ticket, Zhang Yi went to the waiting hall and found a window seat to sit down. Take out your phone and click on the video news to start scrolling through the video. Young man, whether you want an insole or not, it's all hand-sewn good insoles. It feels comfortable to wear. At this moment, an old lady walked over with a young man. The old lady was wearing a short-sleeved shirt and carrying a basket in her hand. She walked up to Zhang Yi and took out a pair of thick white insoles from the basket. No need, thank you. It's very cheap, 3 yuan per pair, embroidered with ping and bat. Wishing you a safe journey. Hello Grandpa, Grandpa is safe and has a long life of 100 years. The young man standing behind the old lady suddenly poked his head out, with a bubbling snot on his face, and grinned foolishly at Zhang Yi. Being called Grandpa by someone of the same age, Zhang Yi felt a bit embarrassed and didn't know how to respond. Don't shout around, it's Big Brother. The old lady turned around and corrected her grandson. The young man who was scolded by his grandmother lowered his head, pulled his hands together, and began counting. 34, 34, 34. Sorry, this child is born foolish. Now Zhang Yi felt a little embarrassed and looked at the fool, asking, what are you counting? Why is there only 34? Hee. The fool chuckled foolishly, because only 34 died. Zhang Yi. If you keep talking nonsense, I'll tear your mouth open. The old lady gave the fool a fierce glare, turned around and wanted to continue her sales. Zhang Yi snatched her tongue and said, give me a pair of insoles. Okay. The old lady quickly took out a brand new pair of insoles from the basket and handed them to Zhang Yi. This is good. Big Brother, buy this. At this moment, the fool took out another pair of insoles from the basket, which were not embroidered. Instead, he casually doodled a few strokes with a watercolor pen. The crooked and twisted lines look messy. This cannot be sold, it's all your scribbling. The old lady quickly asked him to put the insole back in. No need to change, that's it. I'll give you another pair of good ones. Zhang Yi took out a 5 yuan bill and handed it to the old lady. No need, one pair is enough. The old lady took the money and fumbled in her arms, taking out a plastic bag containing a lot of change. From inside, she fumbled and took out 2 coins to hand to Zhang Yi. Young man, you are a kind and good person, but I see you. The old lady wanted to say something more when the fool suddenly started twisting the old man's arm and throwing a splash. I'm hungry, I'm hungry. Okay, I'll take you to eat. Let's go eat. The old lady looked around alertly and quickly coaxed the fool to leave quickly. Finally left. As soon as the grandparents and grandchildren left, the 2 patrolling security guards came to Zhang Yi. How much does the insole cost you? 3 yuan, what's the problem? Oh, that's no problem. Be careful in the future. They are actually professional scammers. Selling insoles is just a pretext to get closer to you. That fool is not her own grandson either. Are they scammers? What do you think, deliberately seeking sympathy, and then telling you that this fool is born to be a village guard? He can see bad things clinging to you, and there are 2 more excuses on the side, not afraid that you won't fall for it. Another young security guard, afraid that Zhang Yi wouldn't believe him, added. I have been working here for 3 months, and at first I didn't believe it. But after 3 months, I saw at least 5 idiots around her who had changed, all of whom were rented from nearby villages. They looked silly and all were acting. You see, when we came, I immediately pulled the old lady and ran. You're lucky this time, but you won't be as lucky next time. Don't stay too long when you're out, especially at the station or airport. You can leave early and leave early. I also want to leave early, but the train hasn't started yet. Upon hearing this, the elderly security guard glanced at the gloomy clouds outside the window and said, It's probably going to rain this day. If you're lucky, leave early. If you're not lucky, you might have to wait longer. Just pay attention to safety. Oh, okay. As soon as the 2 security guards left, Zhang Yi looked at the insole in his hand and casually put it in his pocket. At least 3 yuan. The 15th. The 15th. Outside the waiting hall, someone started shouting the boarding number with a loudspeaker. The people who heard the bus number all stood up and walked out. Dida, raindrops as big as beans fell outside the window, and the cold wind blew on my cheeks, giving me a refreshing feeling. As the rain grew heavier, the clock on the wall had already reached 7:40, but the car outside didn't seem to start. Zhang Yi arrived at the service desk, and the duty personnel at the station were patiently explaining to everyone. Don't worry, everyone. Just wait. It's raining too hard and it's not safe now. Please be patient and wait. Isn't it just a little rain? Why can't we leave? I knew I had bought a train ticket. Upon hearing the news that the departure time would be delayed, the emotions in the crowd instantly exploded. But some people think it's normal, and Zhang Yi heard that a few people around him actually think it's okay. Last month, it was a rainstorm, and the river suddenly flooded the national road, killing many people. Now, as long as it is raining heavily, the train will be delayed as much as possible. Well, 34 people, according to the report, it was a team-building company called Tianhua Sales, but they all died. Are they all dead? Yes, it's not far from the passenger station. That section of the road is near the national highway of the river, and the river water rushed over and drove the bus into the river. No, isn't someone alive? It seems like someone ran out of the bus. It's a girl. You see the report, the girl also died, ran too slowly, got caught in the river and didn't even find her body. Oh, by the way you said that, I have an impression. That girl's boyfriend was supposed to be on the bus, but suddenly had diarrhea at the station and started to thin out. He didn't get on the bus and survived. I heard that the boy guards the riverbank every day, and he feels like he's gone crazy. Oh, pitiful. God is blind and always likes to do such immoral things. A few people talked about the accident last month, feeling a sigh and regret, which resonated with many people. The few people who had just been arguing about the departure also stopped talking. Zhang Yi stood outside, listening to the discussion of the last heavy rain in the crowd, and did not join the crowd anymore. He turned around and walked outside the waiting hall. The thick mist makes the surroundings look hazy. At this moment, his gaze penetrated through the fence, and the grandparents and grandchildren who had just left were standing under the greenhouse. The old lady is holding a bowl of noodles in her hand, and the fool is holding a sausage in his hand. Seeing Zhang Yi's gaze, the fool laughed foolishly while eating. Zhang Yi turned his head over. Da-da-da. A trivial sound of footsteps rushed from behind. Hurry up. Hurry up, if you don't leave, you'll be driving. A few people braved the rain and ran towards the parking lot. Isn't the departure delayed? The parking lot is very dark, and the roar of the car's engine can be faintly heard in the distance. 35, 35. 35, I'll drive before I even come. At this moment, a shout came from the parking lot. After confirming that it was the car number he was taking, Zhang Yi didn't have time to think much and quickly walked inside. Here we go. He stepped on the accumulated water and quickly walked forward in the direction that the pedestrian had just rushed towards. This bus is parked at the rear end, with gray-white lights shining inside, making it look like it's almost full. In front of the bus door, the driver was wearing a short-sleeved shirt and holding a horn, standing in the rain almost drenched. Seeing Zhang Yi, the driver glanced up and down and said, 35. Yes. Oh my, you're just one person away. Hurry up, get in the car. Zhang Yi pulled the armrest and got into the car. Pop pop, the floor of the carriage was covered in water and mud, mixed with a smell of shampoo and sweat. Zhang Yi found a seat by the window and pushed open the window, letting the cool breeze in. Master, hurry up and drive. Let's go now, let's go now. The driver wiped the rain on his face casually, sat in the driver's seat and cursed roast. Poochie. The car door slowly closed and slowly drove out of the gate of the passenger station. I'm finally leaving. When Zhang Yi looked out of the car window, he noticed that the fool was also standing at the entrance, grinning and staring at him with eyes that seemed to be different from a smile. His lips moved slightly and he said, 35, 35, 35, 35. End of this chapter. Chapter 3, I am not an orange, seeking follow.up reading. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3, I am not an orange, seeking follow.up reading, roaming and rumbling. The heavy rain hit the car window, and a clattering sound sounded. A hand suddenly entered his arms from the side, and in his ear came the fragrance of a young girl's body and murmuring in his dreams. Why have you been using the toilet for so long? I waited for you to fall asleep. The girl smashed her mouth, like a coquettish cat, digging her head into her arms. Hey, you two can be so bored in the company. Don't be so bored in the car. I'm still single and don't want to eat dog food. The young man sitting on the right side of the same row looked as if he had been injured. The girl raised her hand and gestured her middle finger to make the young man obediently shut up. Looking at the girl in his arms, his face showed confusion and his mind was in a daze, unable to remember anything. Stop talking, I'll call my name. The middle-aged man in a suit stood up with a roster and walked towards the back seat of the car, comparing it to the list in his hand. Ling Peng, Fei Xiangyang, Fu Ji. Directorly, what day is not good for the company to choose? It's better to stay at home than come out for team building on this rainy day. Only you talk too much. Who knows if it's going to rain? Director Li walked over and saw the two people on the car seat who were greasy and crooked. Zhao Ju, Dai Moli, he said, arrive. Dai Moli waved her hand. Director Li frowned and said, sit still, sit still. I know you've just received your certificate, but you also need to pay attention to the company's image. Zhao Ju, is your stomach still hurting? We're taking the national highway all the way, and there's no rest area in the middle for you to use the restroom. Zhao Ju. He touched his face and instinctively felt resistance to the name. Zhao Ju, are you okay? Dai Moli in her arms saw him not speaking and quickly rubbed her stomach to show concern for him. Oh, it's okay. It's okay, I can't help it anymore. Just tell the driver, but it's not easy to find a pit for you on this rainy day. Ha ha ha. Director Li's words caused a burst of laughter. Why laugh? People have 3 anxieties. They say you're like Pichio, just eating and not pulling. Dai Moli blushed. When everyone saw this, they immediately closed their mouths. They all knew that Dai Moli was notorious for being aggressive and unruly in the company. In order to pursue Zhao Ju, she even publicly begged her for love at the company's annual award ceremony. It can be imagined how crazy this girl is when she becomes bold, and no one wants to provoke this mother tiger. Cough cough. Director Li quickly coughed lightly and said, all right, all 35 of us are here. Let me briefly say a few words. Our Tianhua sales team has achieved the target this year, and the company leaders know that everyone is working hard, so this month we will give everyone a bonus of 3,000 yuan. Orange, are you really okay? Dai Moli leaned up and asked softly with concern. No problem. He shook his head and leaned back, trying to distance himself from Dame Li. Looking at the girl in front of me who is very concerned about me, I was not moved in my heart, but felt very uncomfortable. I'm fine, don't hold me so close, I'm a bit out of breath. Dai Moli quickly stepped back and took out her phone. A bonus of 3,000 yuan, let's spend 6,000 yuan together. Don't you want to change your phone? It's perfect to get you a new one. Oh, by the way, there is still a little left. How about Lao Wang's spicy hot pot? You really like it. Let's have a meal. Hey, why is there no signal on the phone? Dai Moli opened her phone on Taobao and found that there was no signal at all. She stood up and held up her phone to see if she could receive the signal. Looking at the girl who was calculating for herself, Zhao Ju's expression became numb, holding her forehead and trying hard to think about all the information about herself and the girl. But no matter what he thinks, his mind is empty. Did I lose my memory? The piercing sound of brakes sounded, and everyone in the carriage hesitated to move forward. Damn it, why is it so blocked? Someone tilted their head from the seat and saw the parked vehicle ahead through the front window of the bus. Their already bad mood instantly plummeted to the bottom. The driver impatiently honked the horn twice, but the car in front didn't move and he didn't have much temper. No, let's go back first. Anyway, we just left the bus station and it's not too far. Someone started playing the drums of retreat. But Director Li and the driver ignored him. The rain is getting heavier and heavier. Look at the nearby river channel. When I passed by 2 days ago, the riverbed was exposed, and now the water level is so high. It's normal, it's like this during the rainy season. The people in the car looked at the increasing rain outside, and they didn't know that the planner of the team building was a pig's head in roast. You all sit still, I'll go ahead and see what's going on. If we can handle it, we'll wait. If we can't, we'll turn around right away when there aren't many cars behind us right now. The driver looked at the motionless traffic ahead and finally couldn't hold back. He stood up and said to the crowd. Then he quickly walked out of the car with an umbrella. Shwa. The umbrella was opened, and the driver took out a cigarette from his pocket, put it on his lips, took a strong puff, and casually locked the car door. Zhao Ju turned her gaze to the turbulent river in front of her, feeling a bit uncomfortable in her heart. Orange, what's wrong with you? Dai Moli asked with concern as she noticed his pale face. No, it's just a bit dizzy. Dai Moli quickly placed her hand on his forehead and said, "If it doesn't burn, it's motion sickness. I brought motion sickness medicine." Speaking, Dai Moli took down her shoulder bag from the luggage rack and began to search for it. "Oh, I remember to bring it, where is it?" The large satchel was opened, and Zhao Ju took a random look into it. There were snacks, fruits, toilet paper, anti-towels, facial mask and other messy things in it. At this moment, he noticed the bright red marriage certificate inside. "Do you also carry this thing with you? Isn't this just a newly obtained certificate? It's not warm." Dai Moli shyly pursed her lips and smiled. Zhao Ju looked at the loving look in Dai Moli's eyes, and suddenly felt that this seemed quite good. He reached out and held his marriage certificate in his hand. Finger stroked the steel stamp on top and opened the marriage certificate. Zhao Ju and Dai Moli. The names of the two caught the eye, one orange and one jasmine, as if they were a perfect match. Their names were all sweet, and even he couldn't help but raise his lips. But when he turned his gaze to the photo of the two, his smile froze in a moment. The photo is not a group photo of the two, but a man with a black and white background. The man's eyes seemed to be fixed on him, and a line of blood and tears flowed down the photo. The marriage certificate in front of me gradually turned into a death certificate. Ah! Suddenly, a burst of tearing pain hit, and countless chaotic sounds rang in my ears. "Hello, my name is Zhang Yi, and Zhang Shulai is my father. Listen to music, smoke, listen to my music, I also want to smoke a cigarette. Since you've taken something, just sign it and don't make things difficult for me, an old blind man. 35, 35, 35. Ah. It hurts. Orange, orange, what's wrong with you?" Everyone in the car was also frightened by this scene and rushed forward shouting. "I am Zhang Yi. Not Zhao Ju." The scene of Zhang Yi holding his head and being forgotten overlaps with Zhao Ju's identity at this moment, and this process is like countless little people tapping in his mind. Zhang Yi remembered why he was here, even though he had to take the bus leaving the city. Tianhua Sales, bus, heavy rain, river water. Isn't this a bus accident that occurred a month ago? Why am I in this place? In an instant, a strong sense of crisis struck Zhang Yi's mind. He was not sure what was going on, but if he stayed in the car, he would definitely die. Dai Moli was frightened and hugged Zhang Yi tightly with both hands. "What's wrong with you? Where does it hurt? Hurry up, hit 120. Everyone took out their phones. "No signal, do you have a signal?" "No." Director Li also walked over and shook Zhang Yi's shoulder, saying, "Zhao Ju. Zhao Ju." At this point, the pain of tearing gradually began to ease. Zhao Ju, no, it was Zhang Yi's trembling body that began to slow down. "Xiao Zhao, are you too tired? You didn't rest well last night." Director Li is still constantly inquiring about Zhang Yi's situation. "Quick, this." Zhang Yi opened his eyes and looked up at Director Li, intending to shout for everyone to get off the car immediately. But when he saw the rotting face in front of him, with two eyeballs staring at him intently, Zhang Yi's remaining words were all in his mouth, almost vomiting along with him. His gaze turned to the others. Under the concerned gaze, there were various twisted and decaying faces, and at that moment, even the air began to stink. Zhang Yi's face instantly turned much pale, and he couldn't help but think of the number in the fool's mouth. 35, Orange, are you really okay? How about we get off the car and go to the hospital? Dai Moli reached out and pulled Zhang Yi's arm. The cold and stiff fingers touched his skin, and a layer of goosebumps involuntarily appeared on Zhang Yi's arm. Looking at Dai Moli beside her, there was a slightly swollen face with a wound running from the left cheek to the chin, and Zhang Yi could even see the exposed teeth underneath the wound. "No, it's too dangerous for you to get off and walk back in such a heavy rain. I can't bear the responsibility if something happens. Director Li immediately interrupted Dai Moli's words. But it's very close to the bus station here, and we can take a taxi to the hospital when we step out. Director Li's face had already begun to become impatient. Zhang Yi could see white worms wriggling under the decaying flesh on his face, and his expression became even more ferocious. I can't take responsibility for what happened. Everyone sit back and take their seats. No one is allowed to get off the car until the driver returns. After speaking, Director Li even glanced at Zhang Yi's face with a malicious and twisted gaze, as if a big hand had forcefully pinched his heart. Currently, new book recommendations require PK, but I find it difficult to add updates during the new book period. Moreover, my status has not changed yet, so I can only shamelessly ask for follow-up reading. I will try to update as early as possible every day. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Escape for Life. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Escape for Life. Only when Director Li turned around and returned to his seat did Zhang Yi gradually calm down. He turned his head to look out the window, and the river water in the river had begun to climb up the embankment. If I don't run anymore, I will really die here. Zhang Yi's gaze swept around, and they were sitting very back, while Director Li was sitting next to the car door, as if deliberately guarding it. Zhao Ju, are you really okay? Do you want to drink some water? Dai Moli thought he was feeling unwell when she saw him not speaking, so she took out a thermos and asked. It's okay, thank you. Zhang Yi shook his head and looked at Dai Moli. Although the swelling and wounds on her face looked grim, the concerned gaze could not deceive anyone. The employees in the other seats are still sitting together, chatting and laughing, discussing what to eat for tonight's gathering. Obviously, including Dai Moli, they, like themselves, had a chaotic memory and did not know that they had died, let alone what would happen next. No. Not right. Zhang Yi carefully turned his gaze to Director Li. I noticed Director Li occasionally looking up at the river outside, as if he was looking forward to something. This guy has a problem. Remembering Director Li's resolute attitude of preventing Dai Moli from taking him out of the car, as well as his final look back at himself. Hush. We can't wait for the driver to come back and get off the car. We won't go to the team building. Dai Moli suggested quietly as she watched his face turn increasingly ugly. Jasmine. Zhang Yi grabbed Dai Moli's hand and whispered, do you believe me? What stupid words do you say? I don't believe who you believe. Dai Moli gave Zhang Yi a white glance. Okay. Zhang Yi pulled Dai Moli into his arms and said, if I say there's a ghost in this car, I want to take you out of the car. Do you believe me? Dai Moli hesitated for a few seconds, then bit her lip and said, believe it. Do you really believe it? As long as you say, I believe it. Dai Moli tightly hugged Zhang Yi's waist and said, what do you want to do? I'll be with you. Looking at the cold body in his arms, Zhang Yi felt a deep regret in his heart. Why didn't he meet such a girl earlier? Help me lure Director Li over and then entangle him. Zhang Yi didn't have time to think so much now. He noticed that in just a moment, the river had already begun to flood the embankment and overflow towards this side. If he didn't walk, he really couldn't walk anymore. Dai Moli nodded and said, then hold on a bit, it hurts a bit. Ah. Pop. Dai Moli stood up and suddenly slapped Zhang Yi's face. In an instant, the carriage quieted down and everyone turned around, looking towards Dai Moli and Zhang Yi. Zhao Ju, I really misread you. You're actually in contact with your ex-girlfriend. Can't you forget her? If you can't, we'll get divorced now. Everyone's gaze turned to Zhang Yi, looking at his surprised expression, and they all cast gloating glances at Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi touched his face and then jumped up from the chair, his fingers trembling as he pointed to Dai Moli, you dare to hit me. Divorce, we must divorce. Okay, Zhao Ju, I was blind back then. Why did I take a liking to you? You have time to regret now. You bastard. I'm fighting with you. Daimoli blushed with her eyes and swung her fists towards her. The carriage was suddenly in chaos. Don't fight. Speak up and don't do anything. Everyone quickly stood up to argue, and several male colleagues approached to pull Daimoli over and hold her down. However, they underestimated Daimoli's combat effectiveness too much. This girl not only has a wild and bold personality, but also does not shy away from her actions. Piercing eyes, kicking the crotch, grabbing and pinching. It was like a raging female cat, and as soon as these male colleagues got in touch, they were immediately beaten to death. You shrew! Help, help! Zhang Yi screamed as he stepped on the chair and ran forward. Director, help me, this woman is crazy. Daimoli, what the hell are you doing? Stop making trouble. Director Li sat up from the chair with a dark face and glared angrily at Daimoli. If you continue to make trouble, the company will dismiss you. Dismissal. Give it a try. Daimoli pushed everyone away and aimed her spear at Director Li. Don't think I don't know, at least half of the company's bonus was hacked by you this time. The down payment for the BMW 3 Series you bought was deducted from us. You can just pretend to be a big-tail wolf on weekdays. If you dare to fire me, give it a try. I'll send you a report letter and you'll go to jail. Director Li's lips were trembling as he glared angrily at Daimoli, Zhao Ju. Zhao Ju. Come over here, apologize to Moli. After shouting twice but no response, I turned around and saw Zhang Yi trying to open the door. Director Li's face immediately became gloomy. What are you doing? Upon hearing Director Li's questioning from behind, Zhang Yi's heart thumped. Looking up, I saw Director Li staring at me intently. His flesh and skin cracked inch by inch, and his body began to swell. What do you see him doing? He's just a useless person who knows how to run away when encountering things. His surname is Li. Let's make it clear how you fired me. Daimoli saw Director Li's gaze on Zhang Yi and rushed forward, wanting to continue her entanglement. But at this moment, Director Li suddenly pushed Daimoli away and reached out to grab Zhang Yi, saying, "Don't get off the car." Zhang Yi dodged Director Li's hand, picked up the fire extinguisher next to the driver's seat, and smashed it towards the car window. Click. The sound of glass shattering made everyone in the carriage show a painful expression. Oh my! My head hurts so much. Someone covered their heads, and those chaotic memories flooded into their minds like a tide. Screams, cries, and the cold water pouring in, as I watched the car being swept into the river, despair and regret surged out of my heart. The temperature inside the entire carriage was rapidly decreasing, with desperate screams rising and falling. Director Li rushed towards Zhang Yi like a madman. Don't leave, everyone came out together, we have to go back together. Zhang Yi had no choice but to pull off the safety pin of the fire extinguisher and press the switch towards Director Li's face. Zzz. Ah! In an instant, the carriage was covered in white, and Director Li fell to the ground. Zhang Yi seized the opportunity and threw the fire extinguisher several more times towards the corner of the glass. Bang! The glass was smashed open, and Zhang Yi kicked it a few more times before kicking it open. He leaned over the window and found that the river water below had already flooded to the height of the wheels. Just as he was about to jump down, Zhang Yi found that his feet seemed to be nailed to the ground and could not move. At this moment, a silly laugh came in his ear. 35, 35, 35, 35. The sound is far away, but it feels in my ear. It's that fool. Zhang Yi's mind flashed with a foolish expression, but the seemingly silly and silly smiling face now exuded a ferocious and twisted malice both inside and outside. No grievances, no grudges, just malicious intent to harm you. It's like walking on the road and seeing an ant, you can't help but step on it. The gasping sound of Director Li behind him is getting closer and closer. But now he can't do anything and can only stand still waiting to die. No one can get off the car. Director Li's hand poked out of the dust and grabbed Zhang Yi's shoulder, causing him to despair at that moment. Tangerine suddenly, Dai Moli's voice appeared in her ears, followed closely by Zhang Yi as she felt something colliding with her back, hugging her body and crashing out of the carriage. Puff. The cold river water poured in, causing Zhang Yi to shiver and his body to instantly regain its freedom, struggling to emerge from the water. Reaching out from his pocket, he took out the insoles and saw the crooked and twisted lines intertwined, forming a black centipede. Go to your master. Zhang Yi casually threw the insole back into the bus. By the way, greetings to the 18th generation ancestors of fools. Hurry up. Dai Moli grabbed his arm and swam up high, when the water was almost half a person high, and many cars had already been swept into the river. Zhang Yishui doesn't have a good personality, but fortunately Dai Moli keeps pulling him forward. Buzz. Bang. At this moment, the bus behind him overturned under the impact of the water flow, and the water poured into the carriage. Zhang Yi could even hear Director Li's roar. Before long, the entire bus was propelled by the water flow and swept into the river, rushing forward. Fortunately, I ran fast, otherwise I would have died. Zhang Yi exclaimed in his heart that if he hadn't seen the black and white photos of his father and had awakened in time, he might have died in a daze. As he was about to climb ashore, he didn't wait for Zhang Yi to breathe a sigh of relief. Dai Moli in front suddenly paused. Hurry up, the water will get bigger and bigger later. If you don't climb up again, it will be dangerous. Dai Moli stared at her silently, her pupils turning grayish-white, and incomplete memories began to emerge from her mind. Orange, Orange, where are you? I'm so cold. Dai Moli's memory began to revive, and she covered her forehead in pain. I have already jumped out of the bus, but the water is too big for me to hold on. She is the woman in the news report who climbed out of the bus but couldn't swim ashore. Zhang Yi has a bad premonition. Despair and painful emotions began to spread on Dame Li's body. Jasmine, don't be afraid, I'm here, Zhang Yi comforted softly upon hearing Zhang Yi's voice. Dai Moli was dazed for a moment and carefully examined her face. Her previously remembered face began to become clear. You're not an orange. He shook his head in a daze. She pushed Zhang Yi away, raised her hand, and looked at the corpses on her arm, suddenly realizing. So. I'm also a ghost. Thank you to the editor-in-chief for your efforts. You helped me get the essay up and there was no need to resend it. My mind suddenly became clear and I went to bed. Good morning, end of this chapter. Chapter 5. Open your eyes, seeking reading and collecting. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Open your eyes, seeking reading and collecting, I'm already dead. Orange, where are you? Why did you leave me behind? I'm so cold and tired, why don't you come to find me? Dai Moli murmured to herself, her body trembling and her face filled with resentment. Zhang Yi saw that Dai Moli's emotions were not right, so she turned around and ran towards a high place without looking back. However, the next moment, his shoulder sank and one hand grabbed his throat from behind. Where are you going? Are you leaving me like an orange? Dai Moli's body was already pressed against her back. Cold. Zhang Yi's body trembled, his limbs began to stiffen, and the river around him became increasingly urgent. Zhang Yi knew that if he didn't say anything, his fate would be, wait, I'm not Zhao Ju, but I know where he is. I can take you to find him. Really, it's true, you saved my life, I won't lie to you. Wow. Wow. Dai Moli did not respond, and as she watched the rising river water, Zhang Yi couldn't help but hold her breath. Suddenly, the hand placed around his neck was released. Zhang Yi took a deep breath and swam ahead with all his might, until he was exhausted and lay on the ground gasping for breath when he swam out of the river. Looking back, she saw that the river had completely engulfed her, and Dai Moli stood beside him, staring at her silently. Zhang Yi sat on the ground, taking a few breaths to calm himself down first. In the distance, there are streets shrouded in darkness, and the entire city is lifeless. Not to mention vehicles and pedestrians, there are no ghosts on the streets. This is obviously not the world he is familiar with. Are you able to take me back? Dai Moli shook her head coldly. Don't you know how to go back? Let me think about it. Zhang Yi pretended to cover his forehead and thought, afraid that if he said he didn't know, Dai Moli would drag him into the water and drown him in the next second. Oh, there seems to be light over there. What is that place? At this moment, a faint light suddenly appeared in Zhang Yi's gaze, appearing and disappearing in the dim world in front of him, as if someone was guiding him through with a signal light. What is that place over there? Dai Moli looked in the direction he pointed, but didn't see any light. I don't know, but the place you pointed to is near the passenger station, she said. Let's go take a look. Zhang Yi got up from the ground, which is not far from the passenger station. It takes about half an hour to walk back. Dai Moli didn't move, her eyes fixed on Zhang Yi and said, it's very dangerous over there. Even she said it was dangerous, so it's easy to imagine that the road ahead is not easy to walk. Zhang Yi, however, couldn't care too much. He only knew that he would stay here, and when Dai Moli's patience was worn away, he would also be unable to escape death. Always give it a try. Since there's light, there might be an exit. Seeing Dai Moli unmoved, Zhang Yi added, you don't want to stay here forever, do you? Dai Moli frowned lightly and said, okay, but you have to promise me 3 things. Firstly, don't look back at anyone who calls you on the road, and don't answer anyone who talks to you. Secondly, we should not easily come into contact, as being seen by other things can cause trouble. Thirdly, don't trust anyone. Anyone, including you. Dai Moli nodded solemnly and said, sometimes, including me. Okay, I remember. Zhang Yi nodded heavily, firmly remembering these 3 things in his heart. To be on the safe side, Dai Moli fished out a rope from the river and tied it to their wrists to ensure that Zhang Yi would not escape. After being prepared, Zhang Yi and Dai Moli walked back along the path they had come. The 2 of them walked down the exit of the national highway and saw the sign of the passenger station from a distance. Zhang Yi glanced inside the passenger station through the rusty iron door. It was pitch black and he couldn't see anything clearly, but he always felt like someone was standing in the darkness looking at him. Let's go. Dai Moli pulled Zhang Yi forward quickly, and she didn't dare to stop here. Buzz. Bang. The 2 of them didn't take a few steps, and the iron gate of the passenger station seemed to be pushed by something, making a piercing friction sound. But no one dared to look back and could only grit their teeth and continue walking forward. The buildings here are gradually mismatched with reality, and when you look around, there are mostly collapsed ruins of buildings, a mess. How much further is it? Damo began to feel uneasy, as if there were some inexplicable creatures hidden in the darkness. Zhang Yi looked ahead, and the flickering light in the ruins seemed to penetrate the buildings here and guide him towards that direction. It's right ahead, very close. Let's walk faster. Feeling the light getting closer and closer, Zhang Yi quickened his pace. Wait. However, Dai Moli suddenly stopped at this moment, signaling Zhang Yi not to move forward. Zhang Yi looked at her in confusion. Something's coming up ahead. What is it? As soon as Zhang Yi finished speaking, he saw at the end of the road, 2 children, a man and a woman, holding a white sail and walking forward. Wow! A cool breeze blew over, and white papers flew past their feet. The 2 children's faces were so pale that they were smeared with bright red powder blusher. Laughter erupted from the mouth. A group of people followed closely behind the 2 children, wearing white mourning clothes, scattering paper money, and playing swona. Carrying the coffin behind, although it was a funeral, everyone's faces were smiling. At first glance, there is a team with no visible tail. Funeral procession is very common, but Zhang Yi looked at this procession and felt it was very cult. As Zhang Yi watched the team march towards him in a grand and mighty manner, he began to feel a sense of retreat in his heart. He wanted to run back, but was pulled by Dai Moli with a rope and said, "Don't try to run, it's too late." "What should we do then?" "You close your eyes, pull the rope and follow me. I'll take you forward. I can't speak next. Until it's confirmed safe, no matter who calls you, don't speak. Don't open your eyes. How can I be sure that you want me to keep my eyes open? If it's safe, I'll pull the rope 3 times in a row." Zhang Yi remained silent for 2 seconds and nodded, "Okay. I have no choice, if I want to survive, I can only listen to Dai Moli's words. Close your eyes and your gaze falls into darkness." The sound of the Suona was getting closer and closer, and Zhang Yi felt something walking past him. He tightly grasped the rope on his wrist and walked forward under Dai Moli's guidance. 1 step, 2 steps at first, Zhang Yi could still keep up with Dai Moli's pace, but after taking more than 10 steps, his body began to tremble uncontrollably, and his facial muscles also slightly spasmed. Take each step and pause for a moment. Even though Dai Moli knew she was safe before finding Zhao Ju, every step required a great deal of courage to take when she lifted her feet. Close your eyes, you can't see anything, lose the concept of direction and time, and darkness has become the only cognition in this world. Zhang Yi always has a feeling that there is an bottomless abyss waiting for him to step into. Bang! With a sudden sound, Zhang Yi suddenly softened below his knees and stumbled forward, lying on the ground. Reason and unease struggled on both sides, prompting him to open his eyes and see what was outside. Dai Moli didn't speak, just pulled the rope in Zhang Yi's hand, signaling him to continue walking forward. If possible, he would prefer to lie on the ground now, at least the feeling of touching the ground with both hands can make him feel a little more at ease. But Dai Moli's pulling became increasingly urgent, reminding herself to leave quickly. Zhang Yi gritted his teeth and stood up, continuing to walk forward. At this moment, Dai Moli, who was walking ahead, suddenly stopped in her tracks. "Here you go, open your eyes." Zhang Yi didn't open his eyes. "Really, it's time. Open your eyes quickly and let's continue on our journey." Zhang Yi pulled the rope, but there was no response from the other end. Instead, Dai Moli's urging became increasingly impatient. "Hurry up, this place is very dangerous. If you don't leave, I'll leave. I'm not joking with you, hurry up. If you don't open your eyes again, I'll twist your head off now and dig out your heart. Open your eyes, open your eyes. Are you talking, mute? Bastard, are you deaf? Damn it, open your eyes for me." Dai Moli's voice became increasingly sharp and distorted. It was not her voice, but more like a man's. Zhang Yi's lips were trembling, and his hands clenched tightly. "Deaf and mute stinky blind man, go to hell." After cursing profusely, the man's voice gradually faded away. At this moment, Zhang Yi felt the rope on his wrist being pulled a few times, and he continued to follow the traction of the rope forward. After hearing the voice just now, Zhang Yi gradually adapted to this feeling. "It's safe now." Dai Moli's voice rang out. Zhang Yi did not open her eyes. Seeing this, Dai Moli pulled the rope 3 times and said, "You can open your eyes now." Zhang Yi felt the rope being pulled 3 times before daring to open his eyes. After seeing that Dai Moli was really in front of him, Zhang Yishan took a deep breath and raised his hand to wipe away the tears from the corners of his eyes, suppressing the urge to look back. "Just now. Let's go first, this place is not safe either." Dai Moli dared not stay any longer, and the two of them walked towards the dim alley in the distance. Just now, Dai Moli's face also showed fear. "I didn't expect that behind the team, there were some old guys who had been dead for countless years. One of them seemed to notice that you were a living person and stopped me from leaving. It's really dangerous." Zhang Yi nodded, thinking of the feeling he had just felt when pretending to be blind, and his body involuntarily trembled. By the way, my name is Zhang Yi. Be righteous. Zhang Fei's Zhang, graceful elegance. Oh, how much further is it? Zhang Yi looked ahead, the light getting closer and closer. Right ahead. The two of them quickened their steps and walked forward. As they walked out of the alley, the faint street lights gradually became clear until the peach-red light shone on Zhang Yi's face. Zhang Yi widened his eyes and looked at the peach-red glass door in front of him. After the yellowed sticker read "Massage," his expression became strange. Hiss. After circling around, did I come back again? End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Account Books. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Account Books. How is this place? Zhang Yi looked at the glass door in front of him. He didn't expect that after circling around, he would eventually return to this place. Do you know this place? Dai Moli looked at the brightly lit door in front of her with a nervous expression. She felt that there seemed to be some special force in this door that made her hesitant to approach it easily. Well, I've been here. The series of strange events that have occurred around me all started from this massage parlor. Let's go, I'll take you inside. Wait. Dai Moli placed her hand on Zhang Yi's shoulder. Don't try to run, otherwise I'll drown you in the toilet. Dai Moli's gentleness is limited to Zhao Ju, and towards others, she is more like a shrew. Zhang Yi had already deeply felt how strong the gap was. He placed his hand on the doorknob, took a deep breath, pushed forward forcefully, and strode in. Dingling, dingling. The sound of the bells hanging on the door was particularly piercing at this moment, and my eyes suddenly turned black. Immediately after my ears, I heard Dame Li's screams. You lied to me. Ah. Let me go back, let me go back. Dai Moli's screams and curses echoed in Zhang Yi's ear, but his consciousness had begun to blur. In a daze, Zhang Yi came across a book. The black book cover is intricately engraved with many twisted textures. On a blank piece of paper in the book, there are 2 words written. Account Books. However, this white paper seems more like it has been pasted on it, making it seem out of place. Before he could see more clearly, his consciousness was completely engulfed by darkness. Pop 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 pop. The sound of horse hooves pounding on the cheeks felt a tingling sensation that was indescribable. Before Zhang Yi could open his eyes, he heard Uncle Zheng's voice in his ear. Early in the morning, I thought there was a thief. It turned out you were lying on the chair sleeping. How did you get in, kid? Zhang Yi opened his eyes and looked at Uncle Zheng's face, then sat up from the chair and looked around. Where's Dai Moli? She's the girl I brought back. Girl. I didn't see it. Didn't you see it? Zhang Yi wanted to sit up from the chair, but his head was throbbing and he couldn't exert any strength. You have caught a cold and have a slight fever. There is fever-reducing medicine in the drawer, and upstairs is your father's room. Drink some water and take a nap. Uncle Zheng patted Zhang Yi's shoulder with both hands, took off the key from his waist, and placed it on the table. Remember to lock the door. Where are you going? After work. Seeing Uncle Zheng about to leave, Zhang Yi quickly called out to him, Uncle Zheng. The old man yesterday. He. Zhang Yi hesitated to speak, but the events of the past 2 days were too bizarre. When he spoke, he didn't know how to describe them. Do you believe that there are ghosts in this world? The old man didn't come to speak, and the phone in his pocket rang. Hey, 3-1, don't you go or not? The eldest sister of the Wang family is also here. Leave a seat for me and I'll be there soon. What did you say earlier? It's okay. Remember to lock the door. Ding-ling. Looking at the closed door, Zhang Yi lay on the massage chair, staring at the mirror in front of him. He sat there for a while, wondering if he was dreaming. I wanted to take out a cigarette from my pocket, but when I reached into it, I found that the cigarette box was still filled with water. Looking at the cigarette box in his hand, Zhang Yi casually threw it into the trash can. Stand up and walk outside. Can walk to the door, gaze through the glass door, look at the pedestrians passing by outside the door, and still retract the hand placed on the glass door. Let's take a break here first. Pick up the key from the table and lock the door. Sand. Opening the partition curtain of the inner room, one can see the spiritual niche placed on the altar. On the side was the staircase leading to the attic. Ignoring the shrine in front of him, Zhang Yijing walked straight up the stairs. The attic is not very large, with 3 rooms, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom. Pushing open the bedroom door and looking at the books on the bookshelf, Zhang Yi pouted and said, "Oh, the configuration is quite high." The bed in the bedroom is very large, covered with floral sheets, indicating that the room has been carefully taken care of. Lying in bed, there is still a smell of sun exposure. But he tossed and turned and couldn't sleep. He took out his phone, but fortunately it could still be turned on normally. He opened the news. Zhang Yi clicked on these news, and inside was a photo of a girl named Dai Moli. In addition to reports on buses, Zhang Yi also found some relevant news, and he flipped through them one by one. Sadly, on the same day, an accident also occurred not far from the incident site. Zhang Yi clicked on the news, which included a short video. In the video, a middle-aged man grabs a vine on the riverbank with one hand and a child of 7 or 8 years old with the other hand. At this moment, a wooden block rushed down the river and hit the man's head hard. The video only has 30 seconds without any follow-up. Until people pulled the firefighter and the child ashore, the firefighter had lost his vital signs, but his hands, like steel, refused to let go of the child's arm. After reading the news, Zhang Yi put down her phone. Is everything from last night true? Where's Damely? I remember she came in with me. Also, when I came in, I saw a book. What is that book? Zhang Yi remembered the account book he saw when he walked into the door, and where was that book? Suddenly, Zhang Yi felt his palms sink and something pressed against his hand. He raised his hand and was stunned. The black cover book in his hand, with a heavy weight, told Zhang Yi that this was not an illusion. When did this book appear here? He was very certain that there was nothing on the bed when he came in. And how did this account book appear out of thin air now? Zhang Yi glanced at the door, then at the window, holding the ledger in his arms, and flipped through the first page, only to find that it was his own information. Zhang Yi. People status. Good ability. Unlocked signed contract. Massage shop owner. Turnover. 0. The revenue can be used to exchange props, unlock skills, and so on, and can be obtained by collecting the operation of the store. What is this thing? When did I become the owner of a massage shop? I didn't inherit this shop, did I? Zhang Yi pinched her face, making sure she was awake. After adjusting her emotions, she turned to the next page. Dai Moli. A light blue card appears on the second page. With a deep blue background and a dim yellow river behind her, a disheveled woman stood on the riverbank, staring at herself with bright red eyes. How could she be in a book? There is also information about Dai Moli next to the card. Dai Moli. Low-level water ghost, under seal, status. Weak ability. Primary water control, low-level water escape, signed contract. Store manager. Contribution amount. 0, summoning or not. Note. Summoned items cannot leave the host's side for more than 12 hours outside the store. Summoned items cannot cause any damage to you inside the store. You can choose whether to summon or seal them. Zhang Yi flipped to the next page. What are these? Zodiac symbols, diamond bells, induction symbols, leave notes. This page is like a table of contents, labeled with various item names. Zhang Yi pointed to the topmost yellow talisman, and relevant information appeared on the blank page next to it. The yellow talisman can cause strong dizziness on evil spirits exchange. 100 revenue, good thing. What Zhang Yi currently lacks the most is this life-saving thing, at least trying to figure out what's going on with him. This thing is a life-saving straw for him. Insufficient revenue, unable to redeem. Zhang Yi tried to light it, but cold handwriting appeared, reminding himself that these things were not taken for free. Turnover. How did you get this thing? First, summon Dai Moli and give it a try. However, she can't harm herself in the store. Zhang Yi flipped over to Dai Moli's page and, just to be on the safe side, carefully read the instructions again to make sure he understood correctly before attempting to summon Dai Moli. Dai Moli, as Zhang Yi gently called out Dai Moli's name, the cards on the ledger burst into a dazzling blue light. The temperature in the room began to rapidly decrease in the next moment. ZZ. The light bulb flickers. The room seemed to be covered in a layer of mist. Zhang Yi stared ahead with wide eyes, but did not see Dai Moli's figure. Suddenly, a hand lightly landed on his shoulder. Scammer. Zhang Yi was taken aback, turned around, and saw Dai Moli pouncing at him with her eyes red. Cold hands were already pinching her neck. It's so cold. Ah. However, the next second, it was Dai Moli who fell to the ground. She curled up on the bed, her hands tightly hugging her shoulders and curling up in a ball, staring at him with aggrieved, painful, and resentful eyes. Huh, it's so close. Zhang Yi touched his neck and looked at Dai Moli lying on the bed, struggling to swallow a mouthful of foam. I've never lied to you. I called you out just to help you. Help me. Yes, it's not my wish for things to turn out like this, but I will still help you, at least help you find Zhao Ju first. Upon hearing Zhao Ju, Dai Moli's resentment on her face immediately calmed down. You said the same before. I used to say things against my heart for the sake of survival, but this time it's true because now you can't kill me. Zhang Yi extended his palm to Dai Moli. Since you're helping me, take me to find the orange now. Okay, but before that, I think for the sake of our mutual trust, let's talk about compensation first, Zhang Yi said, gradually raising the corner of his mouth. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. The Last Gentleness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. The Last Gentleness, Remuneration. Dai Moli widened her eyes. Yeah, I can't help you for nothing, can I? But I don't have anything I can give you. No, you do. Zhang Yi bent down and looked carefully at Dai Moli's face. Knowing that Dai Moli is not human, the fear of Dai Moli is far less intense than that of Wang Bin's father. Since you can't get paid, then work for me and earn money for me. When you earn enough money for me, I'll let you go free. How about that? Working. Dai Moli breathed a sigh of relief, which was much better than she had expected. Yes, including food and accommodation, 5 insurances and 1 fund, weekends off during holidays, annual statutory holidays, overtime pay, and so on. None of them. Zhang Yi asked with a smile, how about considering it or exchanging something else with you? I'll work for you. When will you take me to find oranges? You can do it now, but it's daytime outside. Are you sure there's no problem? You find a container filled with water, and I can hide it inside. Don't let me expose myself to the sun. Can it still be like this? What's so big about it? I'm a ghost, as long as there's water. Zhang Yi nodded and asked Dai Moli to wait for a moment before walking downstairs to find a suitable container. Huh, it's smoother than I expected. Walking downstairs, Zhang Yi patted his chest and let out a long breath. Perhaps I don't need to be so troublesome, after all, I have the power to seal or summon Dai Moli, and she can't harm herself in the massage parlor. A twist of the tongue may not be sweet, but there may be a contingency. Instead of letting Dai Moli hold a grudge against her, it's better to let her willingly help her. Even if she left the range of the massage parlor, Daimoli wouldn't be too focused on trying to kill herself. Well, what kind of container should I find? Zhang Yi walked around downstairs and found that there were many things to hold water in, such as the jar used for cupping, which was quite suitable, but it was too eye-catching when taken out. So his gaze turned to Uncle Zheng's thermos on the table. Just this one, it's not big or small, it's convenient to hold in your hand. Zhang Yi rinsed the water cup several times, filled it with water, and asked Daimoli to give it a try. Daimoli looked at the tea stains in the cup with disdain, but still managed to get in. With the lid on, Zhang Yi put the thermos in his pocket and said, "Can you hear me talking?" "It's possible." After receiving Daimoli's response, Zhang Yi confidently opened the door lock. Ding-ling. He remembered hearing at the station that the young man who had not boarded the train had been hovering on the riverbank and should have been able to find it. By the way, a good person would have done the best to find Daimoli's body along with it. After positioning with his phone, Zhang Yi called for a ride-hailing service and headed straight towards the national highway. "Young man, this place is so remote. What are you doing here?" The driver looked at Zhang Yi's positioning on the edge of the national road and couldn't help but ask curiously. "Go fishing." "Fishing?" The driver was taken aback and said, "Fishing to the reservoir, come here to fish. There was a big accident here last month, and it seems that there is still a female corpse that hasn't been found yet. Maybe I'll find it. If you find it, then you have done a great good deed. I heard that the girl's boyfriend is now looking for him on the riverbank like a madman, and he is so thin and disfigured." Zhang Yi felt the trembling sensation emanating from the insulated cup. The car stopped at the roadside of the national highway. Zhang Yi got off the car and shook the thermos a few times, saying, "Can you find your body? You can feel the approximate direction, as long as you get closer, you can find the location." "Okay, let's go find it first. Go east." Zhang Yi walked down the river and swam all the way down. The water level in the river had dried up, and many riverbed areas were ready for people to walk on. I believe someone has already searched before. However, they did not find Daimoli's body. This is not because the search team was not careful, but because Daimoli's body did not wash downstream with the river water. That's almost here. A little to the left, then to the left, wait, it's almost here. Here. Zhang Yi looked around and did not find any abnormalities. That's right, it's right under your feet. At that time, there was a pit below, and I was trapped inside. The soil slope on top of it hit me and buried me in the pit. If you don't believe me, dig it a few times and take a look. How many times do you dig? Zhang Yi furrowed his brow lightly and looked for a branch on both sides. The soil was very loose, and the branch could easily penetrate. Zhang Yi inserted a branch into it and quickly felt that the branch was touching something, soft and not like a stone. "Alright, I'll call the police later and dig out your body first." At this point, Zhang Yi had no intention of digging further. Perfunctory. This is respect. I didn't take it lightly. I'm so sorry if I dug you up. Tangerine Zhang Yi was about to take out his phone when the thermos in his hands suddenly trembled. He looked up and saw a figure standing on the gravel of the river. Is he Zhao Orange? He has lost weight. Zhang Yi walked in the direction of Zhao Ju and asked as he walked. So what do you plan to do? Should I let you out or give him the thermos? Daimoli remained silent. He walked up to Zhao Ju and could smell the fishy smell in the river from a distance. Seemingly sensing someone behind her, Zhao Jumo turned her head and looked over. A young man in his early 20s, but now he looks more like a person in his 30s. Zhao Ju Muron's eyes glanced at Zhang Yi, then he turned his head in disappointment and stared at the rushing river, standing there dumbfounded. Help him. The thermos in his hand trembled, and Zhang Yi could feel Daimoli's voice trembling. Help him. Zhang Yi glanced at the river in front of him, then at Zhao Ju's buttocks and said, "I won't do anything that violates the law by killing people. He wants to commit suicide, I can feel it, help him, please, I want him to live, I don't want him to die." "You don't hate him anymore." "Hate. But I can't hate it now. I can't do it, I'm not a psychologist." Zhang Yi frowned, this matter was beyond his ability. Zhao Ju in front of her may jump down in the next second, and all she can do then is to help Dai Moli report to the police. "I don't want him to die. Please, save him." The thermos in his hand trembled violently, and Zhang Yi almost couldn't hold it. Suddenly, Dai Moli's voice became gloomy and twisted, even hysterical. "If he dies, you must also be buried with him." Zhang Yi knew that Dai Moli was definitely not joking. It was oneself who gave her hope. If Zhao Ju really jumped in front of Dai Moli, under this despair, she wouldn't be surprised if she would shatter herself to pieces. "Do you have a way for him to see you?" To untie the bell, one still needs to tie the bell. Zhang Yi couldn't persuade a person who wanted to die to give up this idea, so she had to let Dai Moli persuade him herself. "Let him drink the water from the cup." "Okay, I'm responsible for making him drink water, and you're responsible for leading him to the body and persuading him to survive." "Me. You are the person he loves the most. If you try to persuade him but he doesn't want to listen, then what do you think I have to do?" Upon hearing Zhang Yi's words, Dai Moli fell silent. Zhang Yi didn't care much, walked forward and turned on the thermos. "Brother, I've been standing for half a day now. Let's have a drink of water." Zhao Ju did not respond, her eyes fixed on the river, and she had no reaction to the water glass handed to her. Seeing that Zhao Ju had no movement, Zhang Yi continued. "Death cannot bring rebirth, and Zhao Ju and Dai Moli wouldn't want you to be like this." Zhao Ju still hasn't responded. Upon seeing this, Zhang Yi decided to take a strong pill and said, "I can show you Dai Moli." I thought Zhao Ju would look at me excitedly when she heard this sentence. To his disappointment, Zhao Ju kept her eyes fixed on the river, not even blinking. Now unless Dai Moli stands in front of him alive, he won't be able to hear a word of anything he says. Zhang Yi looked at the water glass in his hand and then at Zhao Ju's mouth skin, which seemed to be stuck together. "What should we do? He won't drink." Dai Moli was anxious, and she could feel the increasing sense of death on Zhao Ju. Zhang Yishan took a deep breath and looked around to make sure there were not many people around. "Then let him go see you." After speaking, he kicked Zhao Ju's butt. Zhao Ju was already in a daze and was suddenly kicked up with this kick, plunging into the water. When the cold river water surged up, Zhao Ju immediately struggled to emerge from the water. This is the instinct of humans to survive. People who commit suicide will suppress this instinct to the lowest level, but Zhang Yi's unexpected kick actually stimulates this instinct. Just as Zhao Ju struggled to emerge from the water and pant, Zhang Yishuan splashed the water from the thermos into his mouth. "You can handle the rest yourself, and don't bother me if it's not done well." As Zhao Ju awkwardly drank the water from the thermos, Zhang Yi hid aside. "If Zhao Ju comes alive, help him and pull him up. If Zhao Ju sinks, run home immediately." The cold river water washed over Zhao Ju's body. After instinctively struggling to survive, Zhao Ju calmed down and began to relax his body, no longer struggling. Until the body gradually begins to sink, the water surface shimmering with sunlight becomes farther and farther away. In a daze, Zhao Ju felt someone pushing her back, placing her hands on his chest. At first, Zhao Ju felt that this was an illusion before she was on the brink of death. But when the long black hair drifted from behind to before her eyes, until the familiar face got closer and closer, Zhao Ju widened her eyes. "Lily." Dai Moli picked up Zhao Ju's face with both hands, and the touch conveyed on her face made him certain that it was definitely not an illusion. Zhao Ju reached out to grab it, but it was empty. Dai Moli's body quickly floated up with the water flow. "Don't go, don't go. Zhao Ju desperately rushed upstream, grabbing ahead regardless of everything. As Dai Moli's hand approached, Zhao Ju almost grabbed it with all her might. Pop! When the two hands were tightly held together, Zhao Ju was exhausted and could no longer swim. Wow! A force on his arm pulled him out of the river. Huh! You! Cough, cough, cough. Brother, don't take it too hard. If it weren't for me. Hey, don't move around. Go away. Zhang Yi was pushed to sit on the ground by Zhao Ju, and he stood up unsteadily, anxiously looking around. Jasmine, Jasmine. Zhao Ju was certain that what he had just seen would not be an illusion. Just as he was about to jump back again, the open pit on the side caught Zhao Ju's attention. The soil pit seems to have been partially dug open by someone, but that's not the point. Half of the off-white clothes were exposed under the pit, even though they were already very dirty. Zhao Ju recognized them at a glance. They were the clothes on Dai Moli's body. Zhao Ju widened her eyes and pounced like a mad dog, grabbing the soil with both hands and starting to dig. Zhang Yi, who was sitting on the ground beside him, got up and looked at the mud and sand mixed between his fingers. He placed his hand in front of his nose and sniffed it. You! Soon the pit was dug up, and a burst of heart-wrenching cries echoed on both sides of the river. Zhang Yi had already walked away with his nose in his hand, took out a thermos, and poured another glass of water into the river. Dai Moli dived into the river along with it. Looking back, from a distance, I could see Zhao Ju holding the remains of Dai Moli, gently wiping away the sand on the remains, as if saying something about it. Even a little further away, Zhang Yi couldn't hear clearly. Are you sure you're not going to say goodbye to him? Zhang Yi shook the thermos in his hand. I'm afraid. Afraid. Afraid of what? I'm afraid I can't help but take him away. Zhang Yi, holding the thermos cup, unconsciously shook his hand a few times, lifted his head, looked at the gradually darkening sky, swallowed his saliva, and picked up his phone. Hey, 110. Take me home. Oh no, I'll call the police. Yes, we found a female corpse by the river. For many old readers, this may seem slow. The golden finger came out late, circled around, and came back. Maybe, but that's what's interesting about this book. Each chapter is dedicated to writing a good story, maybe not exciting, but at least very complete. For an ordinary author, it can't be said to be 80 points, but on self-evaluation, it's still passing. I hope everyone likes it. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Relics. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Relics. DDDD. When the police car stopped at the entrance of the massage parlor, the old lady on the street had already picked up melon seeds and surrounded it. But when they found out that the police car was only for escorting Zhang Yi out of the car and had no intention of further searching inside, they were all disappointed and left. Thank you very much. If it weren't for you, it would have been very difficult to find this victim. This is the duty of every law-abiding citizen. Zhang Yi straightened his back and said, if there is anything that needs to be coordinated in the back, I will be at your beck and call. Seeing Zhang Yi's cooperation surprised the police officers who brought him back. Well, there shouldn't be any problem. After all, this is not a criminal case, and the identity of the victims can basically be determined. The police officer sitting in the passenger seat took out his phone and said, add a WeChat account. If the other person's family wants to come and thank you, we can also contact you. Okay, Zhang Yi took out his phone. Your surname? My surname is Zhang Yi. My surname is Wu. Officer Wu finished speaking and remembered something. Although you found the body today, it's the rainy season lately. Don't go to the river alone to play. I'm just going for a walk, not very often, said Zhang Yi. Just pay attention to safety. Okay, I remember. Well, goodbye. After waving goodbye to Officer Wu, Zhang Yimou escorted the police car out of the alley, turned around, and walked into the massage parlor behind him. Dingling, as soon as I entered the door, I saw Uncle Zheng sitting on a chair, looking down at the newspaper. I saw Zhang Yi coming back and looking up at the thermos in his hand. Next time you go out, don't take my cup. Oh, let me brush it for you. No need, I'm in a hurry, that's it. Uncle Zheng said. He stepped forward and grabbed the thermos from Zhang Yi's hand before going out. Today, he made an appointment with the eldest sister of the Wang family to dance in the square. It's broken. Zhang Yi quickly stopped Uncle Zheng, who was about to leave. Uncle Zheng, the water inside has cooled down. Let me add some hot water for you. Uncle Zheng opened the thermos, glanced at the water inside, sniffed a few times in front of his nose, and frowned. He casually poured all the water into the nearby flower pot and shook his cup, saying, "All right, it's not dirty. You can drink it without getting sick." Watching all the water poured into the flower pot, Zhang Yi suddenly froze. The public security has been poor lately. Please lock the door when you sleep at night. Oh, okay. Ding-ling. The door closed, and Zhang Yi froze for a few seconds before walking to the flower pot and calling out softly, "Wearing Jasmine. Wearing. Am I here?" Suddenly, the voice of Dai Moli came from behind. Zhang Yi turned around and found that Dai Moli was standing behind her at some point. "It's okay, when did you come out of the water glass? I'm not human, water is just a temporary carrier, as long as it doesn't flush into the toilet, it doesn't have much impact on me. He is a ghost, not a human, so having some ability is also necessary." This also aroused his curiosity. "Is this your ability? What other abilities do you have?" Zhang Yi stared at Dai Moli and asked. "I remember it was mentioned in the account book that Dai Moli seems to have two abilities. As long as I have come into contact with water, I can transfer it within a certain range. Flowing live water is not enough, and besides that, it's about controlling water." Control water. Like by Suzhen. Dai Moli didn't speak, picked up a water glass from the side, took a glass of water and placed it on the table, then gently waved her fingers. Zhang Yi widened his eyes, afraid of missing any detail. As a result, the water in the cup only churned a few times, creating a vortex. "Is it gone?" "It's gone." "Is that all?" "Otherwise. I think I can do it too." Zhang Yi smashed the table and pointed to the splashing water from the water cup, saying, "It's even stronger than you." Dai Moli cast a pair of white eyes at Zhang Yi. This time, she took a deep breath and flicked her fingers on the scattered water droplets on the table. The water droplets returned to the cup, and her fingers lit it again. The water in the cup solidified into ice. "Who?" Dai Moli took a long breath and obviously achieved this level, which was not a small expense for her. "Can you give it a try?" Zhang Yi pretended not to see it and patted his stomach, saying, "Are you hungry? I'll order takeout. What do you want to eat? Don't shift the topic. How about yellow braised chicken?" "Not much, I can't eat either." "Oh, by the way, there are some incense candles. Do you want to try them?" "Are you talking about those on the altar?" Dai Moli looked at the shrine behind her. At first glance, the spiritual niche was not an ordinary thing, and she instinctively felt afraid, even more afraid to think about the incense offerings on it. "What are you afraid of? I treat you and eat whatever you like. As my employee, I still have this kind of benefit." "Really, of course." Zhang Yi walked up to the shrine, pulled out a fragrant candle, lit it for Dai Moli, and picked up his phone to light a dish of rice for himself. The green smoke was ethereal, and Dai Jasmine sucked it into her mouth and nose. The effect of incense candles is much better than Zhang Yi thought. After smoking the incense candle, her face became much livelier, and the swelling and scars on her pale face disappeared, with blood streaks that only humans could see. Dai Moli only smoked less than 2/3 and felt a strong sense of fullness, while the rest couldn't be eaten. Based on the principle of not wasting, Zhang Yishuan inserted the remaining 1/3 into the incense burner. How does it taste? Zhang Yi held the newly delivered rice cover and asked while eating. The taste is good, but it's a bit bland. I like to eat it. When you're leaving in the future, I'll pack it for you, Zhang Yi said with a smile. Where are you going? Dame Li looked at him. Let's get out of here, Zhang Yi added closely, but first, let's figure out what's going on. I have encountered too many inexplicable things in the past 2 days, including Dai Moli in front of me and the account book that appeared out of thin air. Without understanding these things, he dare not go out freely now. This time it's wearing jasmine, what about next time? Zhang Yi cannot guarantee that his luck is always so good, nor can he expect to encounter any female ghosts like Relics, Lilies, and Tai Guanyin to save him in the future. So the most important thing right now is to figure out what's going on. The simplest way is actually to ask Uncle Zheng. Uncle Ku gave him a very unreliable feeling. Thinking of this, Zhang Yi looked at the spiritual niche on the altar, next to which was a box. Zhang Yi took down the box and placed it on the table. Click. Opening the box, what caught the eye were the bright red property certificate and the business license of the store. Zhang Yi put these 2 things aside, and there was a mess of everything below. Watches, passbooks, wallets, necklaces, lighters, copper coins. At the bottom of the box, Zhang Yi found a letter. My son, Zhang Yi Qing Qi, looking at the handwriting on it, Zhang Yi frowned. Forget it, it's important to save your life. He tore open the envelope, took out the letter paper inside, and unfolded it, leaving only 4 words on it. If you leave the city, you will die. Hiss. You. Zhang Yiqiang suppressed his anger and calmed himself down. The 4 words in the envelope didn't say anything, but it seems like they said everything. As long as you leave L City, you will inevitably encounter danger. Can you stay safe in L City? Not entirely, right? But now it seems better to stay in the store. Dai Moli also leaned over and looked at the miscellaneous items in the box, her face full of curiosity. She pointed to the small box in the corner of the box and said, there's something inside that box. How do you know? I feel like there's something strange inside the box, but I don't know anything. Zhang Yi took out the box and opened it, revealing a thumb-sized iron plaque inside. On the front of the iron plaque is a mischievous head with a blue-faced fang and an open mouth, while on the back is a withered tree without leaves. The brand is not big, it can be worn around the neck like a pendant. It looks quite normal, it's just a pendant, isn't there anything special? He handed the pendant to Dai Moli on the side, wanting her to help him see what was special about it. Dai Moli reached out to pick it up, but when her hand touched the hang tag, she suddenly screamed and threw it to the ground. What's wrong? The sudden change surprised Zhang Yi a bit. It's okay. Dai Moli held her little hand and felt a burning sensation. First, help Dai Moli up, then hold the hang tag in your hand. There's no different feeling, the material looks like copper, and there's a slight redness under the light. However, upon closer inspection, the workmanship is quite exquisite. However, since Dai Moli dare not touch this brand, it indicates that this brand may have a slight killing effect on ghosts. Perhaps wearing it on her body can ensure safety. Zhang Yi hung the pendant around his neck and stuffed it into his clothes, feeling so cold that there was nothing special about it. Put it on first, even if it's for peace of mind. I didn't want to inherit this store and the so-called inheritance, but it's important to save my life, and he can't afford to worry too much. Dingling, dingling. At this moment, the glass door was pushed open, and Zhang Yi thought it was Uncle Zheng who had returned. He stood up and saw that it was not Uncle Zheng, but a middle-aged man. The other person lowered their head and stood at the door. I want a massage. It's not open yet, the master is not here. Come back later. Zhang Yi saw that the other party was here for a massage and responded by saying a scene sentence. However, at this moment, the man suddenly reached out and grabbed Zhang Yi's wrist, lifted his head, and a dark red blood flowed out along the man's forehead. His eyes were red as he stared at Zhang Yi. My head hurts so much, my head hurts so much. End of this chapter. Chapter 9, 200 in hand. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9, 200 in hand. Suddenly, a strong sense of crisis struck. Looking at the man in front of him, whose head was constantly bleeding with blood, Zhang Yi instinctively wanted to hide behind, but the man's hand tightly gripped his wrist like an iron hoop. My head hurts so much. The man's face gradually approached Zhang Yi, and the blood on his head increased. Let go. Jasmine wanted to come forward and help, but was stopped by Zhang Yi's gaze. This man had great strength, and he dared not let Jasmine take action rashly. You have a headache because you have been under too much pressure lately. Don't get excited, lie down first, and we will give you a massage to relieve the pain. The man clearly injured his head and was confused. After hearing Zhang Yi's words, he nodded blankly. You sit down first, I'll go get the tools. My head hurts so much, it hurts so much. The man closed his eyes. Not only did he not let go, but he pinched more and more tightly, even making him feel a little pain. Zhang Yi bit her lip and tried again. Don't worry, the pain will stop in a moment. You can let go first, otherwise how can I massage you? Seeing the man ignoring him, Zhang Yi could only look at Daimoli. Jasmine, you can give this brother a head spa. Me. Jasmine widened her eyes. Yes, don't be nervous, just do what you just did. He remembers that ice compress seems to be able to relieve pain, but as for whether it works or not, he doesn't know. Just now. Oh, I got it. After a brief moment of confusion, Jasmine finally understood. I'll go prepare for it. She hurriedly turned around and ran upstairs. Brother, relax a bit, shall I pinch your shoulder first? Zhang Yi tried to pull out his hand, but couldn't pull it out at all. Dang 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 dang. At this moment, Daimoli walked down the stairs holding a basin of water. She set the basin aside and looked at the man lying on the massage chair, unsure of what to do next. It's okay, how convenient are you to come? Zhang Yi comforted on the side. Okay. Daimoli looked at the man whose forehead was still bleeding, reached out to pick up a handful of water, slowly approached his head, and opened her fingers. Dida. Bean-sized water droplets condense into mung bean-sized ice droplets, rolling down the man's forehead. Ah! Ha! The man's chest was heaving and he was panting heavily, but his grip on Zhang Yi's hand had already begun to relax. Seeing the effect, Zhang Yi quickly signaled to Jasmine to continue. Jasmine received Zhang Yi's encouraging gaze and began to be bold, focusing her attention on continuously sprinkling ice beads on the man's forehead. Before long, the temperature in the entire room seemed to drop significantly, and Zhang Yi even felt a bit cold. Jasmine's fingertip condensed a piece of ice and pressed it against the man's forehead, slowly wiping it off. Gradually, the pain on the man's face began to fade away. Holding onto Zhang Yi's wrist, he slowly began to let go. Zhang Yi quickly took the opportunity to pull out his hand and stood aside, with the other hand resting on his chest pendant. Daimoli pushed the ice sheet with her fingers, slowly pushing it along the man's forehead. Then she dipped her fingers into the water basin, and her slender fingertips were covered with ice like nails. While avoiding the man's forehead wound, she gently grazed deep along the man's hairline. Although the technique may seem clumsy, the process is particularly enjoyable. Before long, the man let out a snoring sound. Daimoli continued to massage seriously, and after completing the entire process of applying ice, gently tapping with her fingers, the man opened his eyes and looked at the reflection on the glass in front of him. Thank you, it's much more comfortable. The man fumbled for a thick stack of banknotes from his pocket, then carefully pulled out two and placed them on the table. Are these enough? Enough, welcome back next time. Zhang Yi looked at the bright banknote on the table, and the number of 100 yuan on it seemed never to be annoying, but the premise was to ignore the 4 big characters of Tiandi Bank on it. Although the technique is very amateur, the effect of treating headaches is very good. The man bluntly pointed out Dai Moli's amateur skills, but also gave him affirmation. Newcomers, we still need to slowly train. Your head. I saved the little boy and was smashed open. Oh, Zhang Yiling paused for a moment. I'm leaving, boss. Next time I'll bring my friends along. Dingling, dingling. After the man pushed open the door and walked out, Zhang Yi looked at the 2 dark banknotes in front of him, lost in thought. What are you thinking? Dai Moli lay on the table, gently rubbing her sore little hands. Watching how hard she had worked for so long to earn so little money, she suddenly felt a bit uneasy in her heart. A lot. Zhang Yi turned her head. When did you learn how to massage? Zhang Yi looked at the technique of wearing jasmine just now. Although it was clumsy, he went through it one by one, not unconsciously. Every step was done with a preparatory massage. I haven't learned it before, but I often do facial SAP, and it's just this set back and forth. If you're tired, go upstairs and rest. There's also a small bedroom on the left upstairs, which can be used as your employee dormitory. Do you have a bathtub? Zhang Yi glanced at Dai Moli and said, there is one in the toilet. Then I'll sleep in the restroom. Zhang Yi. It was already very late, and Zhang Yi didn't have the habit of staying up late. He locked the door and looked at the 2 dark banknotes on the table, reaching out to take them. But when his hand touched the money, it turned into ashes in an instant. Is it gone? Zhang Yi blinked his eyes and looked at the ash on the table. Even if it's money from the underworld, it can still be considered money. Is that all that's left? But he immediately thought of something, opened his hand, and tried to meditate on the ledger. The thick ledger immediately appeared in Zhang Yi's hand out of thin air. With an expectant gaze, I flipped through the account book and as expected, my turnover had already increased to 200. As expected, the so-called revenue is to earn these ghost guests money. Turning to the next page, I found that under Dai Moli's information, the contribution rate has increased from 0 to 200. This indicates that the revenue was earned through Dai Moli's efforts. With this 200 turnover, Zhang Yi was instantly not tired. Holding the ledger in his hand, he walked into the room and began to study it. There are many interesting items that can be exchanged in the account book, most of which are used to deal with ghosts. But there are also some very strange descriptions of things. For example, the description of serving bowls that requires a turnover of 2,000 points to be exchanged is very vague, with only a simple sentence. This bowl is very heavy. The person who picked it up sat on the altar, while the person who couldn't pick it up was smashed into pieces. Zhang Yi flipped through the directory, clicking on it repeatedly. Looking at these magical props, it's more addictive than brushing a phone. Until the next day, Zhang Yi rubbed his eyes and lay on the bed, not knowing what time he had fallen asleep last night. After a glance, it was already noon. Walk to the door of the bathroom. Dong dong dong, have you woken up yet? I want to go to the bathroom. Click. The bathroom door was opened, and Dame Li walked out from inside. She leaned against the door and looked at him pitifully. I'm hungry. I'll come downstairs and offer you incense later. After Zhang Yi finished speaking, he headed straight into the bathroom. After closing the door, letting go, and simply grooming, Zhang Yishan took a deep breath and walked downstairs with Dai Moli. Downstairs, Uncle Zheng is massaging a guest. Pop 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 pop. Gently tapping the guest's cheek with both hands, the guest's expression relaxed. The chubby cheeks were repeatedly kneaded under Uncle Zheng's fingers, and the skin began to lubricate. Uncle Zheng. Zhang Yi walked up to the shrine and casually took out an incense stick from the table, placing it in his hand and lighting it up. Sure, I brought my girlfriend back so quickly. Hee, you and your father have a common language about this. Uncle Zheng turned around and glanced at Dai Moli, then continued to pinch the customer's shoulders. Don't misunderstand, she is the new apprentice recruited in our store. Zhang Yi said, lighting the incense on his hand and holding it up. This is Uncle Zheng. If you have anything you don't understand, you can ask him. Hello Uncle Zheng, my name is Jasmine. The guest lying on the massage chair looked up at Dai Moli and said, what do you know? I can do hydrotherapy. Oh, the spa is good, I'll come next time. Click. Before he could finish speaking, Uncle Zheng twisted his finger, causing the guest to grin in pain. You have a misaligned cervical spine, lie down and don't move around. Oh. The guest immediately became honest and lay obediently on the massage chair, not daring to move. Uncle Zheng turned around and looked up and down at Dai Moli, saying, okay, someone happened to help me share the burden. Zhang Yi handed the fragrance to Dai Moli's hand and then walked over to Uncle Zheng, saying, Uncle Zheng, how did my father die? I don't know, he went missing for 4 years, and I applied for him to be declared dead. Does he leave anything else, such as a diary? No, it's all in the box. Oh. Zhang Yi lowered his head and looked at the guest who was enjoying himself with his eyes closed. He couldn't help but extend his finger and poke the other person's face, confirming that their skin was soft and not dead, before releasing his hand. Uncle Zheng, who exactly is my father? Uncle Zheng poured the essential oil into his hand and said, your father is the boss, and I am an employee. I don't know who he is, but there is one person who knows. Who is it? Zhang Yi walked over to Dai Moli and handed over only 1/3 of the incense candle in Dai Moli's hand, inserting it into the incense burner in front of the shrine. Turn left 100 meters when going out, walk west, cross the road, there are 2 traffic lights, and the 3rd doorway on the right side. There is a person named Qing Sao inside, and she knows best. Qing Sao. Yes, a widow who sings opera. When your father is free, he goes to see her. Sometimes he goes all night. She knows who your father is the best. Have you seen her? Zhang Yi's face looked ugly. No, I also heard what your father said. He often says, this Qing sister.in.law is a pitiful person. Ding ling. Uncle Zheng quickly chased up to the door, opened it and poked his head out, saying, hey, don't misunderstand me. I'm not an archer. Your father is quite conservative in this regard, don't fight. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Qing Sao. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors.